biomedical, chemical materials, but I've always been drawn to curing diseases as kind of the ultimate problem. I think that medicine is making breakthroughs now, and it's moving at the fastest pace it has ever moved in the past. Gene therapies are one of the therapeutic modalities that are undoubtedly going to revolutionize medicine, probably along the lines with cell therapies and tissue engineering, where we can eventually build entire tissues and maybe even organs. And that was essentially the genesis for Remedium. We felt that the technology was right, it was mature enough so that Remedium Bio could bring medicines to market using the genetic medicine approach relatively efficiently, relatively expeditiously, and with a price point that's accessible to the population. Medicine has to be affordable, it has to be accessible, in our opinion, and make an impact in people's lives where we're modifying the disease progression or potentially curing the disease rather than just masking symptoms. That's what Remedium is all about, and we aim to do that by employing gene therapies.
Frank, how is Remedium advancing gene therapy to realize the potential?
So most people who've heard about gene therapy probably have some preconceived notions about gene therapy. It's very expensive. It can be risky for certain types of diseases. It may be suitable only for very rare monogenetic diseases. The flip side of that is, if you're familiar with gene therapy, you've seen some amazing transformative results with the technology. Single treatment, nearly curative effects for some very, very serious diseases that are out there. What Remedium is doing, the fact of the matter is those preconceived notions and challenges with gene therapy they mentioned are all a function of technology limitations of current generation technology that Remedium has come up with solutions to. So we've designed a new way to deliver gene therapies that makes them very cost effective, not only less expensive than other gene therapies being developed, but less expensive even than alternative treatments on the market today, like treating patients with protein therapeutics themselves. We've overcome other limitations with the technology. With current generation technology, your body forms an immune response that makes these one-time treatments. We've come up with a technology that doesn't engender that immune response, so you can retreat if we need to. And very, very importantly, we've solved a challenge with current generation gene therapies in that the dosing is fixed. You don't have the ability to adjust the dosing after the treatment. The system we've designed allows you to adjust that dose after the treatment, so you can have the same convenience of a single treatment, the same durable benefits of traditional gene therapies, but without a lot of those pain points, to make them affordable and a better alternative that can remove a significant burden from the healthcare system.
So you talk about pain points, but when I think of injections, I think of pain. But so it's a little different. But I understand after reading some of your website that there's a system that you guys have developed that removes that problem.
At the very least, reduces the number of injections that would be required. So when I think of a simple explanation for gene therapy, it's the delivery of the genetic cargo, something we call DNA, which is really the instructions. Think of it as a book, the instructions for the parts that make us work, the proteins. Some proteins are structural, they provide rigidity to cells, they make us up, like collagen, they make up our skin, elastin, they make it elastic. Other proteins allow for interactions between cells. They can communicate, they can adhere, they can become one cell versus another, make up, for example, the front of the eye versus the back of the tooth. Gene therapy is the instructions for how that happens. And the most common types of treatments that are out there today in the space of what we call biotech are biologic proteins. To engender those treatments, they typically need to be injected daily, weekly, or monthly, and oftentimes they become lifelong therapies. An auto-injector or pre-filled syringe would need to be used to deliver that drug underneath the skin on a regular basis. What we hope to do with our technology is, rather than delivering the protein, so that functional element, we hope to deliver the instructions to the cells, the same cells that would be otherwise seeing that protein, but we deliver the instructions for the protein and the cells produce that protein. So the cells produce that functional element. And because of what Frank mentioned earlier, the ability to adjust that dose following initial administration, you would essentially only need one treatment rather than repeat daily, weekly, or monthly injections. And then you could adjust that dose up or down following initial administration, significantly reducing what we call the injection burden, or the number of injections a patient has to live through.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that the patient can make the adjustments, or is that done by computer?
Initially, the technology would likely require somebody like a caregiver, a physician, or a nurse to make the adjustment just for safety purposes. But as the technology matures, and again, it's at a relatively initial stage of development, but once the technology matures, in theory, adjustments of the expression of that protein or the production of that protein could be done relatively simply, even by the patient themselves.
Interesting. Wow. Frank, tell us a little bit, being repetitive here for a minute so the audience can catch up. Our audience is corporate, US and global, 60% US, 20% Europe, about half of that is London, and 15-20% in Asia Pacific, with a lot of that in India and Singapore.
Mm-hmm.
Some in Hong Kong and Beijing. But okay, let's talk about gene therapy. What is gene therapy? You're trying to cure disease, right?
Correct. As Alex alluded to, one of the primary functions of the cells in our body is they make proteins. There are tens of thousands of proteins that our cells make that regulate everything in our body. When there's a problem with a particular protein in your body, usually the result is some type of disease. Or when you can supplement your body's own production with a different protein that might have therapeutic benefit, you do that. And the only way to deliver those proteins today is you have to inject them into the body. And as Alex mentioned, proteins are miracle drugs. We developed the ability to manufacture these on a large scale, three or so decades ago. Insulin was one of the first proteins that came to market that revolutionized the treatment of diabetes. But proteins are different molecules than other types of drugs. You can't take a pill. Your body will break them down. You need to inject them. And when you do, they don't last very long. They're present for a relatively short period of time. Hence, if you're trying to get these miraculous benefits of protein therapeutics, you have to keep injecting them into your body. And that's the significant burden for patients in the healthcare system. So gene therapy, as Alex said, delivers to the cells in your body and to certain cells in your body the instructions to make these proteins themselves, which is what your cells already naturally do. It's really restoring your body back to what it is supposed to do. And once your body takes over that production of the protein in the right quantity, you no longer need repeat treatments. It allows your body to take over. So that's really, in a nutshell, what gene therapy is. It is restoring your body's capability to make correct proteins to essentially treat disease.
So as you could tell, I'm a know-nothing, so I'm going to ask some stupid questions probably. So what you're doing is making genes, making molecules with instructions?
We make the instructions that your cells need to make these proteins, and then we've developed a proprietary vehicle, or we call it a vector, to deliver those instructions specifically to certain cells in your body so that those cells can make these proteins themselves.
So this is generally, again, I'm a layman, this is like what the COVID vaccines were made to do. Similar?
Somewhat similar to what the COVID vaccines do. And in that particular case, it's a short-term effect. Our treatments are meant to be more durable than that, to last a longer period of time. And our treatments are meant to deliver proteins that are therapeutic, that can help treat disease. And vaccines are meant to deliver something that your body's supposed to respond to develop an immune response. But there are overlaps with the technology, certainly.
To what extent are you using stem cell?
We are not using stem cells. Stem cells are a great way to potentially treat certain diseases, but what we do is give your own cells the ability to correct any deficiencies they might already have.
That's great. That's a genius thing. So, Alex, tell us about Prometheus.
Yeah, so Prometheus is a technology that I think Frank and I alluded to in some of the previous comments. Essentially, Prometheus is a combination of a vector or a vehicle that delivers those genetic instructions and the genetic instructions that tell the cells how to produce that functional protein, tell the cells how to produce that therapy. And the unique thing about Prometheus is that the cells we target are actually our fat cells, what we call subcutaneous adipose tissues. These are cells immediately below the top layer of the skin. Usually these are cells that don't have a specific life or function sustaining role in the body. So you could think of them as, some people think of them as maybe excess or auxiliary. But to us, they're an excellent cell type that we can deliver this genetic cargo to, or genetic instructions to, without impacting function sustaining organs, like for instance, the liver, the heart, the spleen, or the kidney. We go after a cell type that isn't really critical, but they are very good at making proteins, and they are very good at reading those instructions. And once we deliver those instructions to those fat cells, they produce the protein and engender the therapeutic effect. And the last element of this Prometheus system is what Frank mentioned earlier, is the ability to adjust the dose after initial administration. Today's gene therapies are effectively one-dose treatments. The dose that a patient receives is a dose they're going to live with for the rest of their life. It might slightly decrease, but you can't adjust it up or down after initial administration. The system that we designed and called Prometheus has built-in elements that allow for the adjustment of that dose. You can increase it if the patient requires additional therapeutic effect, or you can decrease it if, for example, the patient no longer needs that therapy. That's the technology in essence. And maybe the last thing that I'll mention about the system is, again, we think that medicine, it has to be a basic human right. It just has to be affordable and accessible. The Prometheus system was intentionally designed to be extremely low cost. Our aim was to not only design it to be significantly lower cost than today's gene therapies, but also even lower cost than some of the protein treatments that Frank was describing earlier. So that's Prometheus in a nutshell. Frank, what did I miss?
The one thing that I would highlight is the truly global nature of the technology and the potential it really has for significantly reducing burdens in the healthcare system. If you see some of the amazing benefits of gene therapies that are being brought to the market today, you do understand that those treatments are really only going to be available to a relatively small subset of the world's population. If you live in a wealthy country, if you have health insurance, you'll have access to those treatments. But that situation is likely to persist into the future. With this technology, because of what Alex mentioned, it truly is a low cost to manufacture treatment. You have the ability to, on a global basis, send one-time treatments to any patient anywhere in the world that can with one treatment, durably treat a disease. Whereas today, they may not have access to cutting edge technologies. And if they do, it is very expensive to manufacture those treatments, to ship them around the world, repeatedly, and have those patients have to interact with the healthcare system to take those injections repeatedly. You eliminate all of that, and you can ship a simple, relatively inexpensive, easy to use one-time treatment anywhere in the world and treat patients really globally. So I think that's the potentially most profound impact of the technology and what it potentially offers in the future. So
the ability to scale it quickly. You had sent me some information, or I got it from a website, I guess. I'm just going to read this. Without the pharmacokinetic sawtoothing, which is associated with repeat protein injections. That's a mouthful for me. But that's exactly what you were just talking about, though, right?
One of the challenges you have with these protein therapeutics that offer miraculous effects for a lot of diseases is that, as I mentioned, you have to inject them. And it's a burden. And you have to repeatedly inject them. And you try to space out those injections as much as you can, because it is a significant burden, not only for patients, but even just the healthcare system in general. And as they get spaced out, what happens is you inject these proteins, and once you inject them, there's a higher concentration that's available in your body. And over time, they're eliminated by your body. And then that concentration drops lower and lower. So that's sawtoothing. That's pharmacokinetic sawtoothing. It's the concentration of these therapeutics, in your blood as they circulate in your body. And what can happen with that is, usually with most therapeutics, there's an optimal therapeutic range you want to be in, where you get the maximum efficacy, and you stay above that line. But all therapeutics do come with side effects. When the concentrations get too high, you can experience some of those side effects, some of those adverse events. So the challenge with traditional injected therapeutics is you need to make sure those spikes don't cause side effects, and you need to ensure that when the concentrations go lower, you don't spend too much time suboptimally dosed. So that's the challenge inherent in all protein therapeutics, and it's very, very difficult to solve. With this technology, you have a one-time treatment. You have very stable protein expression, very stable levels in your blood that you can titrate into the optimal therapeutic zone. So you have the potential to achieve better efficacy because the patient doesn't spend time suboptimally dosed. You also have the potential to have safer products because you avoid those spikes. You just stay in that optimal zone continuously. So that's, we believe, another significant potential benefit with delivering these types of therapeutics in this manner.
So you're getting ready to present at the American Society of Human Genetics conference. So that's pretty exciting.
Actually, we just had the opportunity to present there, and that was last week, and it was a very exciting conference, a packed event over in Washington, D.C. We presented there our first investigational therapy that's based on this Prometheus technology. It is targeting type 2 diabetes and obesity. And again, it's an investigational product, so not yet approved in any jurisdiction, and it's relatively early, but we're seeing some very promising data where you may be familiar with a class of drugs called GLP-1s or incretins. These are drugs that promote weight loss and help patients control type 2 diabetes. And these drugs are injected daily or sometimes weekly, but they're really intended to be therapies over a long duration. The challenge with those daily or weekly injections is, first, like Frank mentioned, the pharmacokinetic sawtoothing. When you inject that drug, the concentration goes up and then eventually drops, and it drops relatively quickly. But the other challenge is that once you get to the peak of that concentration, the patients typically develop some gastrointestinal symptoms, and there's been some studies that show that patients discontinue treatment after the first year to the rate of almost like 2/3 of the patients that are undergoing that treatment. So what we've seen in our, again, very early data is that our single treatment could perform as well as daily injections of this GLP protein and potentially avoid the pharmacokinetic spikes, which may have the possibility of reducing the gastrointestinal symptoms, which result in the discontinuation. So it's potentially a lower cost option that's better tolerated by patients and doesn't require daily or weekly injections. It could be a treatment that lasts for years. So that's the therapeutic that we presented at the American Society for Human Genetics, and it was a very exciting event indeed. We're very grateful to have had the opportunity.
I'm grateful to have you guys on the show. The name of it is To Life, medical TV talk show, and we've done a series with my partner Mark Holo, who's a Parkinson's patient, and we've had on his doctors, some of them are CEOs of their biomed company, and we've had also the president of the National Stem Cell Foundation, Dr. Paolo Grisanti, as a guest speaker, and talking about doing neuro research in the Space Center because it's zero gravity. Apparently, that's a cool thing for them. Are you doing anything like that or thinking about it? Research in the Space Center.
We're not going into space. We don't think we need to make a significant impact on global health. We have a lot on our plate with our current technology because it really can apply to a very, very large number of diseases that exist today.
Well, congratulations. This sounds like a terrific thing, and I'm really happy to have you on our show. Come back again.
It's been a pleasure. Enjoyed doing it. Would love to.
Thank you, Ed.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you, Ed.
All right, this is Ed signing off from San Diego, and Frank Lupino and Alex how should I pronounce your name?
Just Alex is fine. It's got half the alphabet in it, but Alex Welcher.
Okay, thank you. Signing off from the Boston area, my hometown. Take care.
Thank you. Have a good night.